So at this point, we've got all of the line work there. We just need to play with it and make it look good, essentially. So to illustrate some of the difficulties that we're going to encounter here, I'm going to very quickly just make a modification and show you what part of the problem with it is. If I go to my sidewalk and I change the line weight to something very thick, so like a 0.9, just for argument's sake and for visual representation. Then I go to plot and I preview it. This is what you're going to see. You won't see exactly this, but depending on which line Rhino picked to flatten and make 2D with, you might have to actually go through some of your line work to change the layer that it's on in order for it to become a sort of cohesive family. And so what I like to do more than anything else is simplify some of that process by choosing the objects that are going to be the most bold first. And so for me, that would be the profile of the building and anything that is a feature. So the sidewalks, the landscape, not the parking lines because there are too many of them and they're too dense. But that's pretty much it on this site. So I've got, so I'm basically just going to jump back out into model space. And here is where I'm going to select the line work. Yeah, how do I want to do that one? I'll do it this way. So my sidewalk is going to probably be the most important one. So I'm going to select that first and just make sure that I've got a fully complete profile for sidewalk, right? So it goes all the way around. The landscape line here at the end, I transition to a sidewalk line because the sidewalk is going to be thicker than the landscape lines. Going and following it around, following. This one needs to be transitioned, and so do these. So now when I zoom out, can you guys see the blue up there well enough? Sort of, kind of? All right. Yeah, so it goes all the way around. It will not connect here, but that's okay, and you'll see why. Well, yeah, that's okay. So the other thing that I have is the landscape layer, which now needs to be modified and cleaned up because we modeled it sort of basic for the exercise. So I'm going to turn the landscape layer on. I'm going to get rid of these now straight lines and transition that back to the original curve just to clean it up. Some of this stuff is already in AutoCAD. If you get really clever, you can actually look at that. That was a polyline. If you get really clever with it, you can actually just reinsert some of this line work back into the original AutoCAD file and blend the two together, but that's going to be a workflow that's much more custom than we're going to be using in this class. So here, and I'll just finish that off with lines. That's all I did was I deleted that extra polyline and I just threw a new line in there. Let's see. This one is the sight line. This is an object 0 line. And these are my bus lines, I believe. So they're buses. Okay, everything else is predominantly good to go. So let me just play with a couple of things here. Where was that? I need to create a new layer for the envelope perimeter. And you'll see why when we get into it, but I'll call this env perim. And I'll make this one orange. And so with this one, I'm basically just going to draw a polyline around the outside of my building outline. And that's because the building itself is the main feature of the drawing. And so it's going to have the thickest line that appears on the page. So polyline, I'm just going to start from a corner and start tracing it around. Whoops, wrong layer. Elevation perimeter, polyline. So pick a corner to start from and then just start tracing around the outer edge. And for me, I'm actually not going to trace around this balcony that I created because the balcony is a secondary feature. It's not a main feature of the actual building envelope. So I'll go back to the inside face and connect like that. Okay. And then I don't need this line because that's kind of irrelevant at this point. All right, so let's take a look at the development real fast. So I go back to my layout. I'm going to set my line weights. I need to rename the object 0 line to setback. So yours is probably going to look a little bit different, but the reason that I changed that is because that's going to be a dashed line. In fact, that's probably confusing to introduce it that way, so allow me to pull up an example. Where's Chrome? All right. Okay. So here's a an example of an architectural site plan. In fact, this one looks like it's a little bit more oriented toward grading. The grading, those contour lines that look all wavy and stuff, that's the landscape, right? So each of those lines represents an elevation datum on a hillside. So, but what I'm getting at is that, you know, the information that is less important, right? So all these redundant grading lines are really, really light, almost gray. In fact, here I think they are gray. The building itself is very, very dark, and it's black, and it's very thick. And then some of the other information, like see you've got a dashed line here, I don't know what that is, but this information actually is appearing too dark, because these are setbacks. But that information is actually too dark, that should be much lighter. But you get the idea, right? There's a hierarchy of information and importance. There we go. Oh, it's a fence, not a setback. Maybe it's not. I can't tell. Yeah, it is a fence. But the line work for the parking spaces is lighter than the hatching for the material and all that other stuff. Not the awesomest example, but it works. So here, whoops. So here, like I said, I'm going to make that perimeter around the building the thickest line I have. So under layout, layer properties, I'm going to change the line weight of the building to 0.9. In fact, I'll exaggerate and I'll say 1.0. The sidewalk, I'm going to bring back down to sort of something in the middle, so maybe a 0.5. And the landscape will be just slightly under that, so I'll make that one a 0.3. For the most part, at this stage, because it's a very, very simple drawing, right? Simple drawing should only have 3 levels, I think, 3 levels of line weights in hierarchy, generally speaking. So we would want to leave everything predominantly at default, because that just means it's just going to be the thinnest line that it has or can print. And then the rest of the stuff we need to play with. So that setback line is going to be a dashed line. So we'll load a dashed line. For me, I like to do hidden times 2, or no, hidden 2. So it's the 0.5x hidden line. Say OK, grab the hidden line, hit OK. And we'll deal with hatching in a second, so that's all good for now. So now you can see the dash line shows up, but some of the other line work that I did not expect to be dashed now needs to be changed to a layer that's not going to dash. So I need to set that one up. So I'll create a new layer for parking. Oh, I have a layer for parking. All right, I'll call this one curb cut because that's for the access to the parking lot. 250, and that should be a very thin line, so we can put that back on default. Back into model space. Curb cuts are these things. When I say curb cuts, is there anyone here that doesn't know what that means? No? Okay. So curb cut are these thingies. And you see them for pedestrians, but you also see them into driveways. So this is a driveway curb cut. They might be.
Was it aprons?
That's what I've heard, but I haven't.
Yeah, on the driveways I've heard apron.
Yeah, it might be.
Just because we got a parking ticket for parking on the apron.
Oh yeah, is that how? Okay. All right, I didn't know about that terminology. I've always called them curb cuts, but yeah, that sounds right. I think I have heard it before, not often, but I have. Good call. So yeah, so these curb cuts / aprons, I'll put it on that layer, so I can just select them all like this and drop them onto their appropriate layers. Put on curb cut, and then this is parking. All right, back to layout, and let's take a look at our product. We go to plot, we go to preview, and this is what we get. So I'm kind of zooming in kind of extra close so that you're not looking at the whole thing, but you can actually see the line weights, right? The information for the building, building I'll zoom out for, right? When I look at it like this, the building pops out more than anything else, which is successful. When you move in, it's weird. The resolution on this thing is all screwy. But you see that the building still pops, the sidewalk pops next, and then everything else falls back and is just supporting documentation. And right now that landscape looks kind of close to the rest of the lines, but you can see when I really, really zoom in, and it prints much better than it reads on this silly screen, but you can see that it's just slightly more prominent, the landscape strip, than the other line work. So this is the stage that we would like to get to for today. There are more graphic things that I would like to do with this, so we'll play around with it a little bit more, I guess on Wednesday. And then we'll talk about actually turning this assignment in, because I think a fair bit of it is going to wind up being homework. But we need to move into the sections, and then I want to talk to you guys about like hatching and shading and all this other representational stuff, because now we're starting to get into real cool drawings, I think. What questions do you have?
Can you go over again how you rounded out the lines for the landscaping?
Sure, yeah. These ones here?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. I'll stop the video though, and just leave it to the video once, and I'll show you again here.